everyone for coming. Fantastic to see everyone. Hello, Paul. Welcome, everyone. This is an interactive chat with Paul Heaston about hatching, a little bit about hatching, and Paul's going to be doing a demo. Paul is an Uber sketcher and a stay-at-home dad and an artist with a BFA in painting from the University of Texas in San Antonio. And he has an MFA in painting from Santa Monica. No, he doesn't.
No.
He has an MFA in painting from Montana State University. So welcome, Paul. Everybody just give him a thumbs up or.
All right. Wow. Everybody's here. There's lots of people. So far, there's 100 people already.
Yeah. So we are at the maximum now. No one else can join this call.
Oh,
so
okay. Wow.
You snooze, you lose.
Yeah. I didn't even know that. I'm sorry about that. But you guys are the lucky ones. So I have to apologize to you guys. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. So as Brenda said, I'm an urban sketcher. I've been with urban sketching since, I guess, the beginning. I mean, I'm not the founder. Gabby Campanario founded it. And I was sort of right there with him on Flickr and a handful of others when he started the group that turned into the blog, that turned into the big organization. And that's how I've gotten to know so many people like Brenda, so many amazing sketchers from around the world. And what I love about it is how international it is. And I see a lot of people whose names I know and recognize from other parts of the country, or other parts of the world. I mean, so this is great. I'm going to talk a little bit about pen and ink and hatching. What I do is basically pen and ink work when I sketch. A lot of people are watercolor sketchers. I'm more of a pen and ink guy. So what I'm going to do, I'm change my camera so you can see the stuff I'm looking at instead of my face, but you'll still be able to hear me just fine. I'll pan down here. So pen and ink work and hatching. I do different kinds of pen and ink work. I also work with ink wash, but today I kind of want to primarily talk a little bit about hatching. So hatching is a useful way of what I would say is generating texture and value. So texture is whatever the surface texture of an object might look like or something like that. And hatching can be used to generate that. But just as often, you can use it to generate value. And what I mean by value is shading, so lights and darks. So in this example here, which is a drawing of the botanical gardens here in Denver, Colorado, where I live, I used hatching both for value to get dark darks and for texture to kind of show that kind of bristly texture of these pines and bushes and things like that. There are other ways to use hatching, though. You can use hatching, directional hatching, just as a quick way to lay down a basic value. So here I'm using something called vertical hatching, which is just a bunch of parallel vertical lines to generate a kind of a middle tone. And then I go in and lay down the values later and textures later. So in this case, I'm layering multiple passes of cross hatching to generate really, really dark values. And because this was a black bag, that really needed a lot of hatching to kind of get those values to the value that I wanted. Here, a little demo sheet. This is something I've used with my students before. And let me get the light a little bit better on there. This is a way to practice hatching consistently across the same kind of image. I find that that's helpful for students. And so I'm going to demonstrate 6 different kinds of hatching that I use and why they're effective and when I might use each of those kinds of hatching. And hopefully you'll be able to see. What I think I'll do is I'll use a big, thick, bold pen so that if it's not too, if it's still kind of pixelated, you can still see what I'm doing. All right. So the first one I'm going to talk about is parallel hatching. And parallel hatching is the quickest kind of hatching. It's probably the kind I use the most often. The reason for that is I am already notoriously slow sketcher. So I don't need to slow myself down sometimes when I only have a limited amount of time to do a bunch of sketching. So I try and do parallel hatching as often as I can. I wanted to show you an example that has a lot of parallel hatching real quick. So this is parallel hatching, but it's also a little contour hatching, which I'll talk about in a second. And Brenda, if you want to keep tabs on time and make sure I'm moving quite quickly, so that people aren't going to miss out.
We have 23 minutes left.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to move my light so it's not too dark, but I don't want the shadow of my hand blocking what you're seeing. I think I'll move everything over a little bit so you can see in the center of the screen. So I'll just demonstrate real quickly parallel hatching. It's pretty straightforward. It's a series of quick parallel lines. Wherever you see the darkest shadows or the darkest values on your subject, seeing values from observation is a tricky thing in and of itself. It does take some practice. It's one of those things that's much easier to isolate and look for when you're working from a photo than when you're looking from life. So one of the things I do often is I squint when I'm looking at my subject, and that helps to isolate the values a little bit better. Is that visible to everybody? Can everybody see? So you see how quickly that goes? I'm not sure if you can all see the marks, but I wish I could get my phone a little closer. I have my phone on a tripod dangling from a shelf above my desk.
You've MacGyvered yourself
yes,
doing this.
And that's one of those interesting things that as an artist, trying to do live streams, that's a new thing, a new challenge for all of us, is trying to figure out a way to show ourselves working in a way that other people can understand what we're doing. Yeah. So that is a good quick example of vertical hatching. And for me, vertical lines are much quicker when you're doing parallel hatching than horizontal lines. For horizontal lines, I always find myself turning the paper. I don't know about you. For some other people, maybe the way you hold your pen or your wrist posture makes it easier to do a line that's more horizontal. But in my case, parallel hatching with vertical lines has always been the quickest way. That said, there's another kind of parallel hatching that's called contour hatching, wherein your lines are parallel roughly to each other, but they also follow the shape or the contours of the object. And so they describe the volumes of an object a little bit more clearly. With an object like a hand and fingers, there's lots of curves and round surfaces. So by curving your parallel hatch marks as though they are wrapped around the hand like a piece of string, or imagine a mummy, that would be another way, or a wireframe hand, that's contour hatching.
I have a question for you, Paul, at this moment. Are the lines that you're making right now, even though it's contouring around, you know, the shapes of the fingers, are the individual lines straight, or are you allowing a curve in the line?
They are curved. They're slightly curved because they're short. I'm going to try and hold it up a little bit closer.
Oh, that's helpful. Yeah.
Can you see it? There we go.
Okay.
Try and find my camera here. Yeah, like somebody said, like a series of little C's. Yes, but they're very shallow C's. It depends on how curved the surface is that you're applying the hatching to. And if the hatch marks are short, then the C's will be pretty shallow. But if you want to make them a little bit longer, you can do curves that almost seem to wrap entirely around the finger. And like I said, imagine string wrapped around the finger, or imagine a mummy, or imagine a wireframe hand, and try and describe the contours and the volumes of the shape. Now, obviously, if you're an urban sketcher, you realize that, well, a lot of buildings are just flat surfaces. So there's not as many opportunities on, say, a building facade for contour hatching, in which case parallel hatching works great. But for more volumetric surfaces, like say a tree trunk, or an irregularly shaped building, or a building that has like sculpture in the facade, like a frieze with lots of intricate details, things like that. Or if you're drawing, since we're all at home, if you're drawing a basket of fruit at home, contour hatching is a really effective way to do that. Cross hatching, and since I've already got a contour hatching started over here, I won't redo it on this cross hatching, but I'll show you cross hatching, of course, is adding another direction of hatching. Now you can add it to your parallel hatch lines and keep your cross hatch lines straight also, and just make, basically what you're doing is you're making your values more dense, and when they're more dense, they're more dark. Another way to achieve this is to just make your parallel hatch marks closer together. That's one way to make stuff darker. But the other way, in a way that I think we all think is a little more romantic and traditional in terms of thinking of, like Renaissance artists or something like that, or those great etchings by Dürer or Rembrandt or whatever, is to do cross hatching. So it's a time-honored form of hatching that I really love. It makes things really amazing looking. And you can do that, as I said, with straight lines like parallel hatching, or you can add a second set of contour hatching lines across the first. Now, the trick, of course, with cross hatching is figuring out what is the ideal direction for that second set of hatch marks. That's where I always get into trouble, and it's, even for me to this day, it's still sometimes a trial and error thing. Which way is going to work the best, or which way is going to look a little wonky. And I think I already did some wonky ones. I'm going to put a couple more books up and just make everything closer.
So Paul, just so that you know, I'm watching the time, and we have you have maybe time for one more example. So we have only 15 minutes left.
Well, what I'll do, I'll show you a finished one. I'll do one more example, and then I'll show you my finished workshop here, or worksheet. One of the fun ones I like to do, that a little closer, is something called basket weave hatching. So that's when you do a set of a few parallel lines, 4 or 5, and then you change direction, and you do another set, another set, and another set, and you slowly generate values this way, but it adds a different level of visual interest to your hatching. They look very graphic and bold. I really like the way they work. You can even cross-hatch those individual basket weaves, but it's important not to let each little patch overlap another patch, because then you lose that graphic quality of these basket weave hatch marks. I don't always go perpendicular with the next. I might change my angle 20, 30, or 45 degrees, something like that.
This one is called basket weave hatching. And Paul, can you explain about changing directions on the hatching?
Yeah, so as I was saying, when you do one little patch of the basket weave hatching, you move on to another one, and you change the angle of the direction of 4 or 5 hatch marks just a little bit, enough to create some differentiation here. Here's my finished example. This is the basket weave hatching right here. And can everybody see that? So we'll go back real quickly through parallel hatching, and now you have a much better visual for what I was talking about, if you can recall what I was saying. But basically, the lines are all straight up and down, or whatever angle you feel most comfortable with. But as you can see, they describe value, but they don't really describe the form. So they're not really describing the contours and the volumes of the shape. They just are a way of kind of laying in a flat layer of shadow. Does that make sense to everybody? And then I think you can take a screenshot of that or download this image. I'm not sure, but I'm going to leave it up for the duration. And with contour hatching, you see how first I changed direction. I find that with directional hatching, the best direction to go with contour hatching is kind of perpendicular to the axis of the object. And what that means, if that doesn't make any sense, is think about if your hand or something you're drawing, which direction is the long direction, which direction is the short direction. And my contour hatching, usually I make it roughly perpendicular to the long direction. So, and that helps to describe the shape a little bit better for in my experience. With cross hatching, the top right example, I simply took my contour hatching and added a little bit more to it. I basically a second layer. This is only 2 layers of hatching, so it's just one cross hatching layer. And then on the bottom left, that's fine cross hatching. There's more than 2 passes of hatching. I think there might be 4 or 5. And with something like that, it's helpful to get as fine a pen as you can get a hold of. I think what I used was something like a 0.005 micron pen, and I did 3 or maybe even 4 passes of hatching to get the darks really nice and dark. And if you look at it from a distance, it almost looks like it's been shaded with a pencil. You can get really fine variations in light and shadow when you do fine cross hatching. So it's very true to life looking. And then the middle bottom is the basket weave hatching, which we were just talking about. And with basket, Allison asked a question, how do you do fine cross hatching without the lines getting messy? Well, the short, flippant answer is practice. And the longer answer is you want to practice making the stroke and lifting your pen and then coming back to right next to where you started the previous stroke. That is what takes the most practice. So a lot of people have trouble cleanly lifting the pen at first and getting back to that spot, but just over. Either the distance between their hatch marks is inconsistent and it's too big at first or too small, or they have trouble cleanly lifting the pen. And I usually start at the top and go down, or top and go across down to the bottom right. But some people, they tend to come back up without having lifted the pen, and that gives you that more scribbly look. Now, in and of itself, that's not necessarily a bad way to do pen and ink, but that's not the way I do basket weave hatching or fine cross hatching or any of those. I'm real careful about having learned to lift my pen and come back to a spot just next to where the last hatch mark started. So I spent, I don't know, 20 years of my life kind of practicing how to do that. Somebody asked which is my favorite. Probably I find cross hatching for a really finished drawing and parallel hatching for a quick sketch. And I think all of them can look really good and serve a sketch well. It's just a question of your personal preference plus what you think works the best in whatever subject you're tackling. So there's not a right or wrong way to do it. There's just a bunch of different ways to do it. And then we'll talk about the tick hatching. Thanks, Jill, for that question. And I wanted to go back over basket weave real quick. If you can see in the example now how there's individual little patches that almost look woven, like little 4 or 5 marks sort of parallel to each other, and then I start a new direction of 4 or 5 marks parallel to each other. And then we'll go over the tick hatching. Tick hatching is basically just really short hatching strokes in whatever direction you want to do. You can do it as parallel or vertical hatching. You can do it as contour hatching. The example I've got there is more like contour hatching. But you keep the strokes short and you do more passes, and they don't overlap too much.
That's really great, Paul. Thank you so much. We're going to run out of time, so I just want to close off with a couple of comments, and then we might have time at the very end for a few more comments from Paul. I just want everyone to know that Paul has a book called Paul Heaston Sketches that's available at blurb.com.
So yes, and I heard a few people asking about that book, and I'll show you my book real quick. This is not my work, by the way. This is a fantastic book called New York Line by Line. And I have, that's just something I grabbed out of my bookshelf here.
And who's the publisher, or who's the author, Paul?
What's that?
Who's the author of that book?
Robinson. He was a cartoonist. I'm not sure his first name. I have to look inside. Let's see here. Werner Cruz is the real name of the author of that book, but he went by Robinson, which was, I think, just a pen name. And these are illustrations from, I think, the 50s and 60s of New York City. It's a great book. I recommend it. New York, line by line, beautiful. I'm a pen and ink person, so you know why I love it. If you're interested, I do have those books on blurb.com. Paul Heaston Sketches Volume 1. This is the deluxe edition, which color images and more pages. It's $30 US. And then I have a slightly smaller edition. The deluxe edition is life-size, so these sketches are the size they were as reproduced in my sketchbook. These ones are slightly smaller, and there's a fewer pages. It's black and white. It's $20. That's the regular edition. It's Paul Heaston, blurb.com, Sketches Volume 1. I saw somebody else, I think, asked about the trees again, and I wanted to show this tree image one more time because it's a vertical hatching. Oh, thank you. It's a vertical hatching example, and I tend to probably default to vertical parallel hatching. That would be my go-to. There's another example. Mostly vertical hatching. It just goes quicker for me. If I'm doing a nice finished drawing sitting at a desk somewhere, as opposed to on my lap, then I might do more elaborate hatching styles. But for my money, just doing parallel hatching helps me fill in that space a lot quicker. And I also do ink wash from time to time, and maybe we'll have to do another one of these, Brenda, so I can talk about ink wash,
Yes.
which is a different technique.
And so we're down to the last minute where we have time to chat with Paul. And I just want to say thank you so much, Paul, for
You're welcome.
For your
Thanks for having me.
generosity to come and chat with everyone today and show your art. And you can also follow Paul on Instagram at #PaulHeaston. And Paul also has an exciting new online workshop called Sketch a Vintage Truck, and it was filmed in studio as he sketches the rust and dents and peeling patina of a beautiful old truck that he found near his home. You can watch over Paul's shoulder in real time. It's 1 hour and 10 minutes as he goes from blank page to completed sketch, and students can sketch along with the reference photo provided. And you can find more information about that at www.studio56boutique.com. And so people, you know what, keep making your art and don't worry, better days are on the horizon. And Paul and I hope Paul is agreed that he will come back and chat with us again. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.